Hey, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri Appellate Attorney. I'm retired, and this is not legal advice. Everything I say is simply commenting on the law, and this will be what we're commenting on today. I want to talk for a little bit today about what insurance really is and some things you should think about when you're buying insurance. And probably the first thing I want to point out is that insurance, for example, car insurance, does two things for you. The first thing it does is it provides you with an attorney that the insurance company pays for in the event you get sued because you hit somebody else's car and they claim that you broke their neck, right? So that's the first duty, which is called the duty to defend. There is a second duty in an insurance policy called the duty to indemnify. And that means that there is a sum of money, usually called the policy limit, that is there to be paid out by the insurance company in the event the other side wins a lawsuit against you. Now, it's very important to note that the duty to defend is much greater than the duty to indemnify. And so there are some things, some little tricks that most people don't know about that insurance companies will pull when one of their insureds gets sued because of a wreck or an accident, or, for example, if you have homeowners insurance, if somebody gets hurt on your property. So let's talk a little bit about that. Insurance companies are structured in a specific way. They lay out all of the policies limits. In other words, the limits for the amount of your household goods in a house insurance policy, the limits for structures, the limit for personal property inside, all those things are covered at certain levels. Then it talks about what is insured and what it's insured for, what it's insured against. So, for example, a homeowner's insurance policy would protect you against fire, wind, uh, thieves, robbery, that sort of thing, burglary, all of those kinds of things you would be protected against with a classic insurance policy or classic homeowner's policy. And then in a car insurance policy, you're protected for hitting somebody else's car, hitting another person, anything like that. And the idea is that the reason that all states require that you carry insurance on your car is that when somebody is hurt in an accident, there is a fund of money there to pay their bills and make them whole. That's an important reason, an important public policy reason to require insurance. Because if they didn't require insurance, then the responsibility to fix your car would fall on you, and the responsibility to pay the damages from the other person who hit you would fall on you. Or if you didn't have money to pay it, it might fall on the public through Medicare, Medicaid, something like that. That's the reason why we require car insurance, especially. Now, there's no mandate that you have homeowners insurance, although if you have a loan, almost all loan companies are going to require that you carry a homeowners insurance policy. So after telling you what is covered and what you're covered in case something happens, or the likely areas that they might have to pay on for negligence and that kind of thing, personal property damage, that sort of thing. For example, if you swerve to avoid hitting somebody who runs out in the road and you take out a couple of signs that belong to a sign company, they would have a cause of action against you for damaging their sign. And so there's personal property protection that covers that sort of thing. But after all of those definitions and statements are made about what's covered and how it's covered, then the next thing that comes in are exclusions. And exclusions are the little things that say, we won't cover you if the accident was an intentional act. In other words, if you purposefully swerve to take out that sign because it had a political name on it that you didn't like, and as a result, you lost control and damaged somebody's house. Well, that's an intentional act, and as a result, they're not going to cover you for that. But because they have all of these exclusions, it is often difficult to know what you are actually covered for. And the other thing I'm going to tell you right now is that probably if you're watching this video, you've never read your automobile insurance policy. You probably don't know all of the exclusions that are buried in it. You've probably never read your homeowner's insurance policy. One of the things that happens, particularly in places like Florida and other places along the Gulf Coast, is what's called concurrent causation language, meaning that if your home is damaged in a storm and there is no proof that the water damage occurred before the wind damage, the company can get to say, hey, we're not going to cover this because this was a flood, and we specifically exclude flood from coverage. Now, if the water came from inside your home because your toilet backed up, that's a different situation, unless it also is excluded. But generally speaking, water that comes into the house from the outside, well, that's a flood, and you're probably going to have an exclusion that applies. The criminal acts exclusion. For example, you decide that you want to make a little extra money by babysitting or by running sort of a half day daycare, and one of the kids chokes on his oatmeal and dies, and the other mother sues you. Well, if you didn't have a license to operate that daycare, the criminal acts exclusion is going to prevent coverage. Oh, and the other thing that you're going to get hit with is called the business pursuits exception, which means that if you are engaged in active commerce, if you are doing something like providing daycare services and you don't have specific coverage for the daycare services part, your homeowner's insurance is probably not going to cover you. Now, in a close case, they might defend you, but they're going to do that under a reservation of rights. Basically, what they're going to say is, we're gonna offer you a defense lawyer to pay your call or to take care of your case for you, but if you wind up losing, hey, all that money is on you. Let's talk a little bit about limits of liability. In addition to all of these things that I've talked about with regard to exceptions and exclusions and all of that, um, one of the things you have to be really careful about is having enough coverage. So, for example, if you own a house that is worth $500,000, let's say, and you have insurance, your liability insurance coverage is only for $300,000. Well, if if the damages exceed $300,000, then you're not protecting your home. So you should have at least as much liability coverage as you have in terms of the value of your house. And so you have to buy enough insurance to do the job, because too little insurance is just going to mean that the other side is not going to be interested in having to deal with your insurance company. They're just going to come after you. They'll take the $50,000 or $100,000 they get from the insurance company and smile, and then they'll come after you for the rest. So you have to have enough insurance to protect your personal property and your real property. And here's the other thing. On an automobile policy, you need to have a sufficient amount of insurance on liability protection to cover you in the event that there is something like a 14-year-old child that suffers paraplegia because of an accident that you're involved in. Because those are the kinds of cases where the damages get very big very quickly. And if you don't have enough coverage, again, the insurance company can put up every dime that it has, and the other side can take it, and then the insurance company can, in many states, just walk away because they've done everything that they were required to do. You simply took on more liability than you had insured for. That's not their fault. A good insurance agent will help tell you how much insurance coverage you need. Now, you have to be a little careful there because they obviously have an incentive to sell you more than you probably need. But again, you're protecting something that's really important, which is the place where you're laying your head down at the end of the day. Now let's talk about insurance companies in general. There are some really, really good insurance companies out there. Now, this is not a paid endorsement, but I go through USAA. And to get USAA, you have to be a veteran or a family member of a veteran and or active duty person. And USAA is a really good insurer because it acts to protect its members. A couple of years ago, I was involved in a traffic accident. I accidentally rear ended someone, uh, basically because they pulled into a turn lane and then they slammed on their brakes in front of me. And I did not have enough time to react before I gently tapped the rear end of their car. And they sued because they claimed neck pain. And, I don't know whether the woman had neck pain or not, but I'll take for granted that she did. And so, as a result, they sued me. I passed the case off to USAA. USAA reached a negotiated settlement with them. They were happy. USAA did what they had to do to protect me. It was a real good feeling to know that I had USAA behind me just because they have such a great reputation. There are other insurance companies that do a good job. There are other insurance companies that don't do a good job, especially in the homeowners area. Now, by way of full disclosure, I sued State Farm Insurance Company on behalf of two whistleblowers after the Katrina hurricane. And the allegation was that State Farm was pushing off all of the damages on flood as opposed to wind. And they had some pretty good evidence that these were false claims. And so I sued on their behalf. And State Farm was not a stand up company. They essentially hid the most important witness in the case, the person who was alleged to have engaged in the central amount of wrongdoing in that case. They hid her in such a way that it was very difficult to get any kind of service on her. And the lawyers that represented State Farm refused to accept service for depositions on this particular individual. I'm not going to name her because that's not me. I don't do that. But State Farm was not a very good company to deal with, I felt like, and I pretty much determined at that point that I would never, myself do business with them again. Your mileage may vary, and I've talked to a lot of people who've said they've had great results with State Farm, that State Farm went right in there and got their problems solved for them. And, that's great. Good on them. I'm glad they did. But I think they treated a lot of people down on the Gulf Coast rather badly at the end of Hurricane Katrina. That's my opinion. It's not fact. It's just my opinion. So you have to be careful when you are selecting an insurance company that you know it's going to do the right thing when the time comes. And the best way to find out about that is to talk to lawyers in your area. What insurance companies are stand up insurance companies and which ones are not? I think it's a good thing to do. And really, that's kind of how I found my way to USAA. For a long time, I believed that it only insured military officers. And I found out much later that, hey, you could get in if you were a veteran. So that's how I got in. And it's like I said, it's probably I actually do all my banking through USAA. It's a great operation. They have great customer service. And when I had need for really good insurance coverage, they stepped up and did the right thing by me. So I have a favor to ask of you. Tonight, when you sit down at home after dinner, go get your insurance policies and read them. Find out what you're covered for and find out when you're not covered, because you may be surprised. You may find that there are a lot of times when you are not covered. And as a result, you may want to consider making some changes in that insurance. So that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you very much for being here. If you have the opportunity today, do something kind for someone. Drop me some comments down there in the comments section or email me at the address above. And thank you once again for being here. Come on back tomorrow. Join me down here at the beach and we'll talk about something else. I shouldn't have to say this, but you don't seek legal advice from a guy down at the beach. You seek it from a lawyer in a lawyer's office, where there are people running around in suits and secretaries and all kinds of other people. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm a retired attorney at this point, and although I retain my license to practice in the state of Missouri, I am not here dispensing legal advice. I'm just offering general content on the law. And here are some videos that YouTube thinks you may enjoy.